What if I told you there's a Nobel Prize winning discovery hiding in plain sight, right in your kitchen pantry? Seriously. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the greatest scientific minds you've probably never even heard of. And this is the crazy part, you interact with his work every single day. So let's get into the story of the guy behind your sugar and your coffee. All right, so let's start with a simple question. Think about your morning routine for a sec. What could possibly connect that rich, dark brew of your coffee with the sweet little crystals of sugar you stir into it? I mean, on the surface, they seem completely different, right? One wakes you up, the other gives you a burst of energy. Well, here's the thing. They were both these huge, fundamental mysteries of chemistry. That is, until one absolutely brilliant scientist came along and unlocked the secrets hidden deep inside their molecules. And that's the story we're telling today. So where does a story like this even begin? Well, it's a classic tale, really. Passion versus expectation. And it doesn't start in some fancy, gleaming lab, but in a totally ordinary family business. So let me introduce you to our guy, Hermann Emil Fischer. He was born back in 1852 in Prussia, and he grew up in a world that was just buzzing with the energy of scientific and industrial change. I mean, what a time to be alive. Now, Fischer pretty quickly found himself at a crossroads. See, his dad was a practical guy, and he really wanted Emil to join the family business. You know, the safe, respectable path. But Emil, he had other plans. After a pretty short and frankly disastrous attempt at commerce, his father famously said his son wasn't cut out for business and should go back to his studies. And with that, he finally let his son follow his true calling, science. And wow, what a calling it turned out to be. I mean, his rise was just meteoric. Get this, he earned his PhD by the time he was only 22. And then, less than 30 years after that, he'd go on to receive the absolute highest honor in his field. Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say he made the right choice. So what's the first major challenge he decides to take on? Well, he sets his sights on unlocking what you could call the sugar code. You have to remember, back then, the world of organic chemistry was like the Wild West. It was a total frontier, and one of the biggest mysteries out there was the basic nature of sugars. So Fischer zeroes in on carbohydrates. Now, we hear that word all the time, right? Carbs. But fundamentally, these are the molecules, things like sugar, that literally fuel life itself. So if you could understand them, you are understanding a piece of life's most basic machinery. The stakes were huge. And then, the breakthrough moment. We're in the year 1877. This is the year Fischer discovers a tool that would become the key, and I mean that literally, to changing everything. And not just for him, but for the entire field of chemistry. Okay, so how did this all work? It's actually pretty cool. He basically created a kind of chemical master key. Step 1, he makes this new substance called phenylhydrazine. Step 2, this key allowed him to grab onto different sugars and turn them into unique solid crystals. For the first time, their invisible structures became visible, identifiable. And then, step 3, once he had the blueprint, he could actually build these sugars from scratch in the lab. This was a huge deal because it proved you didn't need some mysterious life force from a living thing to create these complex molecules. But Fischer, he wasn't even close to being done. Oh no. After cracking the sugar code, he turned that razor-sharp mind of his to a whole other group of vital substances, which, you guessed it, brings us right back to our morning cup of coffee and the chemistry of caffeine. This time, he was diving into a group of compounds called purines. Now, these are another supercritical group of molecules. They're absolutely vital for all sorts of things happening in our bodies. They're even a key part of our DNA. But, just like with sugars, nobody really knew what their basic structure looked like. It was a total mystery. So, in this amazing series of studies, Fischer proves that caffeine, yep, the stuff in your coffee, was part of this big, complex purine family. But then he keeps going. He shows that its chemical cousins, theophylline in tea and theobromine in cacao, were all part of the same family too. The guy was basically decoding the chemistry of the world's favorite drinks, one by one. So, by cracking not one, but two of the biggest chemical codes of his time, Fischer cemented a legacy that would literally change science forever. And, of course, the world took notice. In 1902, his genius was officially recognized. Emil Fischer was awarded the Nobel Prize in chemistry. And the official reason for the prize, I mean, it really says it all. He was honored for his incredible work on both sugar and purine syntheses. Think about that. He didn't just solve one great chemical puzzle. He solved two of the most important ones of his entire era. But his impact went even further than that. See, by proving that you could build these complex natural things in a lab, he basically built a bridge between pure science and modern industry. His work paved the way for creating all sorts of new drugs, dyes, and materials, forever connecting what happens in the lab to what happens on the factory floor. So the next time you're stirring some sugar into your coffee, take a second to remember Emil Fischer, the guy who decided not to go into the family business, followed his passion, and ended up decoding the world right there in your pantry. And it kind of makes you wonder, right? What everyday mysteries are all around us right now, just waiting for the next Emil Fischer to come along and solve them?